Hello viewers and welcome to iTTV. I hope you're ready to start a new lesson in Maths with me. Let's move over to my computer and we'll begin there. This lesson is the second lesson of Chapter 1 in the Form 4 Additional Mathematics syllabus. And Chapter 1 begins with a very basic topic of functions. Even more basic than functions is the first subtopic called relations. We are in the process of classifying the types of relations. In relations, two sections are studied. Firstly, representation of relations, and that can be done in three ways. Either Part 1, through a set of ordered pairs, or Part 2, represented through a graph, or finally, through an arrow diagram. Now viewers, these have already been discussed in our first lesson previously. Let's move on to the next thing that we're going to study. The second thing we want to examine are the types of relations. And in this particular section, there are four types to consider. Firstly, a one-to-one relation. Secondly, a one-to-many relation. Thirdly, a many-to-one relation. And finally, a many-to-many relation. A one-to-one relation occurs when exactly one object in the domain corresponds to exactly one image in the codomain. As you can see, viewers, from the diagram, the domain refers to the values in the first bubble and the codomain refers to the values in the second bubble. I do also want to urge you to remember something very helpful, viewers. When we say the phrase one-to-one relation, do take note that the first word one refers to your objects, meaning to say the values in the domain. And the second word one refers to your images, which would be the values that are found in the codomain. Let's reinforce this point in more detail by looking back at the slide of a one-to-one relation as an example, viewers. The first word one refers to the objects, that would be the values in the domain set. And the second word one refers to the images, which would be the values in the codomain set that the objects are mapped to. And it's always going to be that way, viewers, whether we are looking at a one-to-one, or one-to-many, or many-to-one, or even many-to-many. Always remember that the first word in all these relations refers to the objects in the domain, and the second word, which is after the word to, will refer to the values of the elements in the codomain. Even in real life, there are situations where we can experience a one-to-one relation. I'll give you a simple example. Let's take your classroom. In most cases, classrooms in schools usually have just enough number of chairs and tables for the students. Of course, there are some schools with smaller classes and so they have more tables and chairs, but that's a different story. Let's take a case of your classroom having only enough tables and chairs for this number of students. So each student gets one chair. Well, that's basically a one-to-one relation. One student to one chair. Okay, let's move on to the other types of relations. A one-to-many relation occurs when one object in the domain may have more than one image in the codomain. Do take a look at the arrow diagram given, viewers. There are two values in the domain, meaning to say that there are two objects. However, the first object in the domain corresponds to two images in the codomain, making altogether three images in the codomain this time. That's called a one-to-many relation. Coming back to my example, viewers, what if the classroom had more than enough chairs for the students? And in fact, some students may even get to put their school bags on an empty chair. Well, in that case, wouldn't we have a situation where some students may have two chairs to themselves each? For those students, that's what you call a one-to-many. Thirdly, a many-to-one relation occurs when more than one object in the domain share the same image. Do look at the arrow diagram in the slide, viewers. In the domain, we have 3 values this time, meaning to say that there are 3 objects. But it can sometimes happen that all 3 objects corresponded to the same image in the codomain. This is what we call a many-to-one relation. Coming back to my very good example, viewers, in the case of classroom, students and chairs, this time, what if we made the chairs or the number of chairs as the objects and the number of students as the image? It is possible to look at it that way as well. If a classroom has more than enough chairs, perhaps 2 chairs can be given to each student, where a student can sit on one and place their school bag on the other. If 2 chairs are allocated to each student, wouldn't that mean that 2 objects can have the same image? That's what we mean by a many-to-one relation. And finally, viewers, a many-to-many relation occurs when one object may have more than one image and more than one object share the same image. And as you can see, this is represented in the arrow diagram given in the slide, viewers. The domain contains 2 objects, but you will see how some objects will map onto the same image, but sometimes some objects may even have more than one image in the codomain. This is what we call a many-to-many relation. Now, it's best to try out an example this time now, viewers, so that we can understand this topic of relations. State the types of relations represented by the following relations. Part A, a set containing the ordered pairs of 1, 2, 2, 3, and 3, 3. Part B, a graph with the values of the objects and images stated. And part C, an arrow diagram showing us the domain P and the codomain Q. In part A, the ordered pairs 1, 2, 2, 3, and 3, 3 is called a many-to-one relation because objects 2 and 3 from the domain share the same image 3. Do understand, viewers, that the first number in each ordered pair is always the domain, and the second number in each ordered pair belongs to the codomain. Or, if we put it in terms of objects and images, the first number in an ordered pair represents the object, and the second number in the ordered pair represents the image. So do you notice that 2 different objects, which are 2 and 3 in this example, have the same image, which is 3. So we have a case of many-to-one relation. Perhaps, viewers, it would be clearer if I illustrate this on the board. Let's go over there and have a look. Picking up from where we left just now, I was telling you that the first number in an ordered pair always refers to the object values, and so we take out the values of 1, 2, and 3 and place them in the first bubble, which is the domain bubble, and therefore it contains 3 objects, 1, 2, and 3. And then the second number in the ordered pair refers to the image, and the image should always be drawn in the codomain bubble. So we have only 2 images here, 2 and 3, with the value of 3 repeated in one of the ordered pairs, but which can only be written once in the codomain bubble. So I should only write 2 images in the codomain. And if we use arrows to represent which object corresponds to which image, we will find that we get a case of 1 corresponds to 2, 2 corresponds to 3, and 3 also corresponds to 3. This is the classic diagram for a many-to-one relation, viewers. Let's move on to part B. In part B, we have a graph which shows a many-to-many relation because object D in the domain has 2 images, B and D, in the codomain, and objects A and E in the domain share the same image A in the codomain. Do take note of a few things, viewers, to help you understand clearly. The values according to the x-axis refer to the objects, meaning to say all the values in the domain, while the y-coordinates refer to the values in the codomain or values of the images. So do you see that object D has two images B and D, and that would put object D in the case of one-to-many relation, while objects A and E in the domain share the same image A in the codomain, making them a many-to-one situation. Therefore, we have a combination of one-to-many and many-to-many at the same time. That results in a final many-to-many relation. And finally, as for part C, since each object in the domain corresponds to only one image in the codomain, we have a one-to-one relation. Every object in set P has only one unique image in set Q. It does not matter that there are values in set Q which do not have an object related to it. That's because set Q is the codomain. Let's try our hand at one more example. The arrow diagram shows the relation between set P and set Q. State A, the types of relation between set P and set Q, and B, the range of the relation. Now viewers, let's try this example out together. I'll see you at the board. So viewers, do we find it a problem to identify what type of relation? I don't think so. When you've been looking at the arrow diagrams often enough, you basically begin to understand, and you might even begin to remember very easily, the types of relations according to the diagrams. In this case, we have two sets. Don't forget, the first line refers to the domain, which are the values of the objects. We have more than one object sharing the same image in the second line, which is your codomain, containing all the values of your images and more. And in a case where more than one object shares the same image, means that we have a many-to-one relation. So in part A, we can answer that this is a many-to-one relation. And as for part B, to identify the range, focus straight away on your codomain. Your codomain refers to the second line of values over here. There are three numbers in the codomain, 0, 1, and 2. However, our range is only made up of the images, meaning to say the values of 1 and 2 form your range. Remember, in the range, we write it in a pair of curly braces as a set notation. Do take note, viewers, that the value of 0 appears in the codomain, but because it is not an image, it does not appear in the range. There is a slight difference between a codomain and a range, and I hope you recall that from our discussion in the previous lesson. Let's wrap up our lesson for this round, viewers. What is of main importance in this lesson is that we must know how to identify the types of relation that can be found between objects and images. There are altogether 4 types of relations, namely a one-to-one relation, or a one-to-many relation, a many-to-one relation, and finally a many-to-many relation. We've discussed also several real-life situations where we can find these relations occurring, and we've also looked at several mathematical examples where we see these relations in operation. Well, I hope to see you again in the next lesson where you'll join me for more discussion in AddMaths. Thank you and goodbye from iTTV.